The sound of shallow, rapid breathing caught Flynn O'Connor's attention before he even saw her. He was juggling 3 grocery bags in one arm and holding his 6-year-old daughter Lily's hand with the other when he noticed the woman crouched beside her luxury sedan, her back pressed against the driver's door. "Daddy, why is that lady sitting on the ground?" Lily asked, tugging at his hand. "I'm not sure, sweetheart," Flynn replied, his brow furrowing with concern. The woman's face was pale, her hands trembling as they clutched at her chest. Even from several parking spaces away, he recognized the telltale signs of a panic attack. "Hold these for a second, Lilybug," he said, setting the grocery bags down carefully. "Stay right here with our things, okay? I think that lady might need some help." Flynn approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. She was dressed impeccably in a tailored blazer and silk blouse that probably cost more than his monthly rent, but right now her polished appearance was betrayed by the terror in her eyes. "Excuse me, miss, are you all right?" he asked gently, keeping a respectful distance. The woman's eyes darted up to meet his, wide with panic. I can't breathe," she gasped. "I think you might be having a panic attack," Flynn said, kneeling down to her level but still giving her space. "My name's Flynn. Would it be okay if I sit here with you for a minute?" She managed a jerky nod, her knuckles white as she gripped her knees. "Can I try something that might help?" he asked. When she nodded again, Flynn continued in a calm, steady voice. "Let's try to slow down your breathing a bit. Can you breathe in with me for 4 counts? 1, 2, 3, 4. To his relief, she attempted to follow along, though her breath still hitched painfully. "Good, now hold for 2 counts, and out for 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They continued this pattern for several minutes. Flynn noticed his daughter peeking curiously from her spot by the grocery bags, but she stayed put as instructed. "My name's Grace," the woman finally managed between breaths. "Grace Lawson. I'm sorry this is so embarrassing." "Nothing to be embarrassed about, Grace," Flynn assured her. Panic attacks happen to lots of people. As her breathing steadied, Flynn saw color returning to her cheeks. She was beautiful, he realized, not in the artificial, made-up way of magazine covers, but with a natural elegance that seemed effortless despite her current state. "Daddy. Is the pretty lady okay now?" Lily had apparently decided that enough time had passed and had ventured over, dragging one of the grocery bags with her. "I think she's feeling a little better, right?" Flynn looked to Grace for confirmation. Grace nodded, a small smile finally breaking through. "I am, thanks to your dad, and you must be." "I'm Lily and I'm 6, his daughter announced proudly, holding up the appropriate number of fingers. "Do you want a lollipop? Daddy always lets me have one when I'm sad or scared. I have cherry and grape in my backpack." Grace's smile widened, and Flynn caught a glimpse of something genuinely warm behind her initial reserve. "That's very kind of you, Lily. I think I'm okay now, but thank you for the offer." Flynn stood and offered his hand to help Grace to her feet. She took it, her touch lingering for just a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you," she said. "I don't usually. This hasn't happened in public before." "No need to explain," Flynn assured her. "Happy to help. Will you be okay to drive?" Grace glanced at her car, then back at Flynn. "I think I'll sit here for a few more minutes first, but yes, I'll be fine." "Come on, Lilybug. We should get these groceries home before the ice cream melts," Flynn said, gathering up their bags. "Bye, Grace," Lily called out, waving enthusiastically. "I hope you don't get scared again." As Flynn guided his daughter toward their battered pickup truck at the far end of the lot, he couldn't help glancing back. Grace was still watching them, her expression unreadable. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to wonder about her, who she was, what had triggered her panic attack, whether he'd ever see her again, but then he quickly shook off the thought. Women like Grace Lawson, with their designer clothes and luxury cars, didn't typically cross paths with struggling single fathers like him. What Flynn couldn't have known was that Grace was thinking the same thing about him, though for entirely different reasons. Flynn O'Connor's life had fallen into a predictable routine since his wife Amanda had left 3 years ago. He woke at 5:30 each morning to get ready for his job as a foreman at a construction site, made Lily's breakfast and lunch, dropped her off at school, worked a full day, picked her up from after-school care, made dinner, helped with homework, read bedtime stories, and then spent a few hours working on his fledgling woodworking business before collapsing into bed. The woodworking had started as therapy, a way to occupy his hands and mind during the lonely evenings after Lily was asleep. But people had started noticing his handcrafted furniture, simple, elegant pieces that spoke of care and attention to detail, and occasionally commissioned items. It wasn't enough to quit his day job, but it provided a welcome supplement to his income. 3 days after the encounter in the grocery store parking lot, Flynn was kneeling on the floor of Mrs. Patel's living room, installing the custom bookshelf she'd commissioned, when his phone rang. "Flynn O'Connor," he answered, tucking the phone between his ear and shoulder as he continued working. "Mr. O'Connor, this is Deanne Wheeler from Riverdale Elementary. I'm calling about Lily." Flynn's heart dropped. "Is she okay?" "She's fine, but she fell during recess and scraped her knee pretty badly. The school nurse has cleaned it up, but Lily's asking for you. I know it's not our usual protocol to call parents for minor injuries, but she's quite upset." "I'll be there in 20 minutes, Flynn said, already gathering his tools. Mrs. Patel was understanding, as she had grandchildren of her own, and Flynn made record time to the elementary school. When he arrived at the nurse's office, he found Lily sitting on an exam table, her knee bandaged, eyes red from crying. "Daddy," she exclaimed when she saw him, holding out her arms. Flynn swept her up into a hug. "Hey, Lily Bug, I hear you had a tumble." "I was running too fast and I fell on the blacktop," she sniffled. "It hurts a lot." "I bet it does," Flynn sympathized, examining the bandage, "but you're being very brave." After thanking the nurse and signing Lily out for the day, Flynn carried his daughter to the truck, his mind already racing through the logistical challenges. He'd have to take her home, but he needed to finish Mrs. Patel's bookshelf today he'd promised, and the $400 payment would cover Lily's upcoming dental appointment. "Tell you what," he said as he buckled Lily into her booster seat. "How about we stop for ice cream and then you can hang out with me while I finish a project? Would you like that?" Lily nodded, her injury already seeming less catastrophic at the mention of ice cream. "Can I bring my coloring books?" "Absolutely." An hour later, Flynn was back at Mrs. Patel's. Lily settled on a blanket in the corner of the room with her coloring supplies and a tablet loaded with educational games that she was allowed to use on special occasions. "Such a good father," Mrs. Patel commented, bringing them both glasses of lemonade. "My son hardly knows what his children are doing most days, always so busy with his banking job." Flynn smiled politely but didn't respond. He'd learned not to judge other parents. Everyone was doing their best with what they had. He returned to his work, carefully installing the final shelves. He was so focused that he nearly jumped when Mrs. Patel returned to the room accompanied by another woman. "Mr. O'Connor, my friend has just arrived for tea. Grace, this is the craftsman I was telling you about." Flynn looked up and froze, standing in Mrs. Patel's living room, looking equally surprised, was Grace Lawson. "We've actually met," Grace said, recovering first. "Hello again, Flynn." "Grace," he nodded, acutely aware of his work clothes and the sawdust in his hair. "Nice to see you again, Grace." Lily piped up from her corner, attempting to stand but wincing as she put weight on her injured knee. "Careful, sweetie," Flynn cautioned, but Grace was already crossing the room to Lily. "Hello, Lily," she said, kneeling down in her expensive-looking dress without hesitation. "What happened to your knee?" As Lily launched into a dramatic retelling of her playground accident, Flynn watched the interaction with curiosity. Grace seemed genuinely interested, asking questions and sympathizing in all the right places. There was none of the awkwardness or condescension that he sometimes encountered from people who weren't used to children. "You two know each other?" Mrs. Patel asked, looking between Flynn and Grace with undisguised interest. "We met briefly at the grocery store," Flynn explained vaguely, not wanting to share the details of Grace's panic attack. "Flynn helped me when I wasn't feeling well," Grace added, standing up and smoothing her dress. "I never got to thank you properly." "No thanks necessary," Flynn said, turning back to the bookshelf to hide his unexpected discomfort. There was something about Grace that made him feel off balance, a combination of her obvious wealth, her surprising warmth with Lily, and yes, he had to admit, her striking beauty. "Daddy makes the prettiest things," Lily was telling Grace. "He made me a princess bed with stars on the headboard and a toy chest with my name and a little table for tea parties." "Is that so?" Grace asked, her eyes finding Flynn's again. "I'd love to see more of your work someday." Before Flynn could respond, Mrs. Patel clapped her hands together. "What a wonderful idea. Grace, you mentioned wanting custom bookshelves for your home office. Perhaps Mr. O'Connor could help." Flynn felt a flush creeping up his neck. "I'm sure, Miss Lawson has interior designers and professional carpenters for that kind of work." "Actually," Grace said, "I prefer supporting independent artisans, and please call me Grace." There was a sincerity in her voice that caught Flynn off guard. He'd assumed someone like her would view his woodworking as quaint at best, amateurish at worst. But the way she examined the bookshelf, running her fingers appreciatively along the smooth oak, suggested genuine admiration. "Well, I have a small workshop behind my house," he said finally. "If you're serious, you could stop by sometime to discuss what you're looking for." "I'd like that," Grace replied, and Flynn was surprised to detect a hint of nervousness in her voice, as if she weren't completely confident in this interaction either. They exchanged phone numbers, and Flynn finished the installation while Grace and Mrs. Patel moved to the kitchen for tea. As he and Lily prepared to leave, Grace emerged to say goodbye. "I'll call you about those bookshelves," she said. "And Lily, I hope your knee feels better soon." "You should come see Daddy's workshop," Lily suggested. "He has all these cool tools and wood pieces, and it smells really nice like trees and outside." Grace laughed, the sound light and genuine. "That sounds wonderful, maybe I will." As Flynn drove home, he tried to temper the unexpected anticipation he felt. It was just a potential business arrangement, he told himself, nothing more, but Lily clearly had other ideas. "I like Grace," she announced from the back seat. "She's pretty and nice, and she didn't talk to me like I'm a baby." "She does seem nice," Flynn agreed carefully. "Maybe she can come over for dinner sometime," Lily continued. "I could show her my room and all the stuff you made me." "Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Lily Bug. Miss Lawson Grace might just want some bookshelves." "Nuh-uh," Lily said with the absolute certainty of a 6-year-old. "She likes you. I can tell because she looked at you the way Princess Tiana looks at Prince Naveen after he's not a frog anymore." Flynn chuckled, but a small part of him couldn't help wondering if his daughter might be more perceptive than he gave her credit for. 2 days later, Flynn was in his workshop sanding a coffee table when his phone rang. He almost ignored it, his hands were covered in sawdust, and he was in a good rhythm, but a glance at the screen showed an unfamiliar number, and with Lily at a playdate, he never ignored calls. "Flynn O'Connor," he answered. "Hello, Flynn, it's Grace Lawson. I hope I'm not interrupting anything." Flynn set down his sanding block, heart picking up speed for reasons he didn't want to examine too closely. "Not at all. I was just working on a piece." "Good. I was wondering if your offer still stands to discuss those bookshelves for my office." "Of course," Flynn said. "Did you have a time in mind?" "Actually, I'm free this afternoon. If that's too short notice, I completely understand." Flynn glanced at his watch. Lily would be at her friend Emma's house for another 2 hours. "This afternoon works. Do you have my address?" "I don't. Could you text it to me?" "I could be there around 3 if that works for you." 3 is perfect," Flynn said, surprised at how easily the arrangement came together. After hanging up, Flynn looked around his workshop with new eyes. It was a simple structure, essentially a large shed he'd converted with proper insulation, electricity, and ventilation, but it was his sanctuary. Tools hung in precise order on the walls, wood was stacked neatly by type and size, and various projects in different stages of completion occupied workbenches and stands. It was far from fancy, but it was clean, organized, and professional. Still, he found himself straightening up more than usual, wiping down surfaces and sweeping the floor before Grace arrived. He even ran into the house to change out of his sawdust-covered t-shirt into a clean one. At precisely 3 o'clock, a sleek silver Audi pulled into his driveway. Flynn stepped out of the workshop to greet Grace, who emerged from the car looking somewhat different than he'd seen her before. Instead of the business attire or elegant dress, she wore dark jeans, a simple blue blouse, and flats. Her hair was pulled back in a casual ponytail and she wore minimal makeup. She looked younger somehow, more approachable. "Hi," she said, offering a small smile. "Thanks for seeing me on such short notice." "No problem at all," Flynn replied, acutely aware of the contrast between her luxury vehicle and his modest rancher with its aging paint job. "The workshop's right this way." As they walked toward the shed, Grace took in the small, well-kept yard with its simple swing set and the vegetable garden along the fence. "You have a lovely home," she said, and Flynn appreciated that she seemed genuinely to mean it, despite its obvious simplicity compared to what he imagined was her own residence. "Thanks. It's not much, but it's ours. Lily helped plant the tomatoes and zucchini this year. She's very proud of them." "As she should be. How's her knee, by the way?" "Much better." "Kids bounce back quickly," Flynn said, opening the workshop door. "Here we are, watch your step." Grace entered the space, and immediately Flynn saw her eyes widen with appreciation. She moved slowly around the workshop, examining the pieces in progress, running her fingers lightly over a completed end table awaiting delivery. "Flynn, these are beautiful," she said, and the genuine admiration in her voice made something warm bloom in his chest. "Thank you. It's still a side business, but I'm hoping to grow it eventually. You should. This craftsmanship is exceptional." She paused at a small wooden jewelry box with intricate inlay work. "Did you make this too?" Flynn nodded. "That's a gift for Lily's upcoming birthday. She's been asking for somewhere special to keep her treasures." Grace smiled, touching the delicate pattern. "She'll love it." For the next half hour, they discussed what Grace wanted for her home office, built-in bookshelves along one wall with a matching desk and filing cabinet. As they talked, Flynn sketched ideas, and Grace proved to have a good eye for design and proportion. "Would you like something to drink?" Flynn offered when they'd established the basic concept. "I have water, coffee, or I could make some iced tea." "Iced tea would be wonderful, thank you." Flynn led her into the house, again feeling that strange awareness of how she might see his home, the comfortable but worn furniture, the cheerful but budget-conscious decor, Lily's artwork displayed proudly on the refrigerator. "Have a seat," he said, gesturing to the kitchen table as he filled 2 glasses with ice. "The tea's nothing fancy, just something I brew in the sun on the back porch. Those are often the best kinds," Grace said, settling into a chair. As Flynn prepared their drinks, he noticed Grace looking at the collection of photos on the wall, mostly of Lily at various ages, but a few of them together, and one old one of him with Amanda before the divorce. "Your daughter looks just like you," Grace commented. "Same eyes and smile." "That's what everyone says," Flynn agreed, setting the tea in front of her. "She got my stubbornness too, unfortunately," Grace laughed. "I imagine that makes for some interesting parent-child negotiations." "You have no idea," Flynn said, shaking his head with a smile. "Just getting her to agree on which clothes are appropriate for which weather is a daily battle. She seems like a remarkable little girl." "She is," Flynn agreed, his voice softening with pride. "The best thing that ever happened to me." A comfortable silence fell between them as they sipped their tea. Flynn found himself wanting to know more about Grace, what she did for a living, how she knew Mrs. Patel, why she'd had a panic attack that day in the parking lot but hesitant to pry. Grace broke the silence first. "I should tell you that the bookshelves aren't the only reason I wanted to come by today." Flynn raised his eyebrows in question. "I never properly thanked you for helping me the other day," she continued. "That panic attack. It was frightening, and I'm not sure what I would have done if you hadn't stopped." "Anyone would have done the same," Flynn said, uncomfortable with her gratitude. "No," Grace shook her head firmly. "Most people would have walked by pretending not to notice or maybe called 911 at most. You knew exactly what to do, and you were so kind about it. You and Lily both." Flynn shrugged. "My sister used to have panic attacks in high school. I learned how to help her through them." "Well, I'm grateful," Grace said, meeting his eyes directly. "And I'd like to take you and Lily to dinner sometime, as a proper thank you." Flynn felt his defenses rise instinctively. He'd had enough experience with well-intentioned charity to last a lifetime. "That's really not necessary. Besides, I'm sure you have better things to do than what?" Grace interrupted gently. "Then spend time with a kind man and his delightful daughter. I don't actually." Her expression turned slightly vulnerable. The truth is, I don't have many friends in this town yet. I moved here 8 months ago for work, and between getting settled and traveling for business, I haven't had much time for socializing. Flynn studied her face, looking for signs of pity or condescension, but found only sincerity. What kind of work do you do? He asked, realizing he didn't actually know. I run a venture capital firm that specializes in sustainable businesses, Grace explained. We invest in companies focused on environmental solutions, renewable energy, that sort of thing. That explains the panic attack, Flynn said without thinking. Grace looked startled. What do you mean? Sorry, that was presumptuous, Flynn backpedaled. It's just that's a high-pressure job, lots of responsibility. Grace's expression softened. You're not wrong. That day in the parking lot, I'd just gotten off a difficult call with investors. Sometimes the pressure builds up until. She gestured vaguely. Until it has to go somewhere, Flynn finished for her. Exactly. Grace took another sip of her tea, then set the glass down decisively. So, dinner, I promise it's not charity, just gratitude. And maybe the beginning of a friendship. There was something so open in her expression that Flynn found his resistance crumbling. All right, he agreed. Lily would love that. She hasn't stopped talking about you, by the way. Grace's face lit up. Really? That makes me ridiculously happy. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway interrupted their conversation. That'll be Emma's mom dropping Lily off, Flynn said, glancing at his watch. Moments later, the front door burst open and Lily raced in, her words tumbling out before she'd even fully entered the kitchen. Daddy. Emma has a new puppy and it's so tiny and cute, and her mom says maybe we could. She stopped abruptly when she noticed Grace, her eyes widening with delight. Grace, you came to see Daddy's workshop. I did, Grace confirmed with a smile, and it's even more impressive than I imagined. Did he show you my birthday present? I'm not supposed to know about it, but I peeked, Lily confided in a stage whisper. Flynn groaned. Lily, it was supposed to be a surprise. I didn't tell Emma's mom that I saw you hiding it, Daddy, Lily explained earnestly. As if this preserved the surprise, Grace laughed. A genuine sound of delight that made Flynn smile despite himself. Thank you for bringing her home, Jessica, Flynn said to Emma's mother, who was standing in the doorway. No problem at all, Jessica replied, her curious gaze moving between Flynn and Grace. The girls had a great time. After Jessica left, Lily immediately claimed the seat next to Grace and launched into a detailed account of her playdate, complete with impressions of the new puppy's various behaviors. Grace listened attentively, asking questions at all the right moments, her genuine interest obvious. Flynn watched them interact, a strange feeling growing in his chest. There was something right about seeing Grace at his kitchen table, laughing with his daughter. Something that made him imagine other afternoons like this, other conversations, other moments shared. It was a dangerous line of thinking, he knew. Grace lived in a different world, one of business meetings and luxury cars and financial freedom that Flynn could scarcely imagine. Whatever was happening here, this tentative connection, it had boundaries. It had to. Yet when Grace finally rose to leave an hour later, having been thoroughly educated on everything from Emma's puppy to Lily's favorite books, Flynn found himself reluctant to see her go. I should get these measurements back to my office and work up some sketches and a quote for you, he said, walking her to her car. Take your time, Grace replied. And about dinner, are you free this weekend? Saturday perhaps, Flynn nodded. Saturday works for us. Wonderful. I'll text you the details. Grace hesitated, then added, I really enjoyed this afternoon, Flynn. Thank you for showing me your work. Thank you for appreciating it, he replied honestly. After she drove away, Flynn stood in the driveway for a moment, trying to make sense of the complicated emotions stirring within him. When he returned to the house, Lily was waiting with a knowing look that seemed far too mature for her 6 years. Grace is coming to dinner with us, she stated rather than asked. Yes, on Saturday. She wants to thank us for helping her that day at the store. Lily nodded sagely. She likes us, Daddy, I can tell. Flynn ruffled his daughter's hair. She's a nice person, Lily Bug. Now, how about you help me start dinner? As they moved around the kitchen together, Flynn tried to push thoughts of Grace from his mind. He had responsibilities, priorities. A single dad with mounting bills and a modest income had no business daydreaming about a successful businesswoman who probably lived in a house 10 times the size of his. And yet, when his phone buzzed with a text from Grace later that evening, just a simple message thanking him again for the tea and conversation, he couldn't help the smile that spread across his face. Over the next few weeks, what had begun as a business arrangement and a thank-you dinner evolved into something Flynn hadn't expected: a genuine friendship. After their dinner, at a family-friendly restaurant where Lily had charmed the waitstaff and regaled Grace with stories from kindergarten, Grace had become a regular presence in their lives. She stopped by the workshop to check on the progress of her bookshelves. She joined them for pizza and movie night. She even attended Lily's soccer game, cheering as enthusiastically as any of the parents when Lily managed to kick the ball in approximately the right direction. Flynn learned that beneath her polished exterior, Grace was thoughtful, funny, and surprisingly down to earth. She'd grown up in a middle-class family in Ohio, worked her way through college on scholarships and part-time jobs, and built her company from the ground up after several years at an investment firm. "I got lucky with my first few investments," she explained one evening as they sat on Flynn's back porch while Lily caught fireflies in the yard. "Right place, right time, right companies, but I also worked 80-hour weeks for years to get the business established." "That's not luck," Flynn countered. "That's determination and talent." Grace smiled, accepting the compliment with a slight nod. "What about you? Have you always been a woodworker?" "No, that came later. I worked construction through college, that's how I paid tuition. Got my degree in civil engineering, but there weren't many jobs in the field when I graduated. The construction company I was with offered me a management track, so I took it." Flynn took a sip of his beer. "The woodworking started after Amanda left. I needed something to do in the evenings, something creative that was just for me." Grace's expression softened. "How long were you married?" 8 years. We got together young right out of college, had Lily a couple years later." Flynn watched his daughter dancing around the yard, mason jar in hand. The split was amicable enough. She wasn't happy, wanted something different from life. She's in California now, remarried. She calls Lily every Sunday night. "That must be hard," Grace said quietly. Flynn shrugged. "We make it work. Lily's what matters. As long as she knows she's loved, that's the important thing." Grace studied him with an intensity that made Flynn slightly uncomfortable. "You're a good father, Flynn. I've never seen anyone more devoted to their child." "I'm just doing what any parent would do," he demurred. "No," Grace shook her head. "What you're doing, raising her with such attention and love, making her feel secure and cherished while maintaining your own identity and building a business that's exceptional." Flynn felt his face warm at her praise. "What about you? Ever been married? Any kids?" He'd been curious about this, but hadn't found the right moment to ask. "No to both," Grace replied. "I dated someone seriously for a few years in my 20s, but my career was just taking off, and he wanted a more traditional arrangement. After that," she trailed off, gazing out at the fireflies. "I guess I got used to independence. And finding someone who was interested in me rather than what I could offer financially became increasingly difficult." Flynn frowned. "That's their loss." Grace turned to him with a soft smile. "Thank you for saying that." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by Lily's occasional squeals of delight as she captured another firefly. "I got one, Daddy. Grace, come see," Lily called, running toward the porch with her jar glowing with tiny lights. As Grace leaned in to admire Lily's catch, her shoulder brushed against Flynn's, and he felt a now familiar flutter in his chest. These moments had been happening more frequently, small touches, lingering glances, conversations that seemed to carry deeper meanings beneath the surface. Flynn wasn't naive. He recognized the growing attraction between them, saw how Grace's eyes sometimes followed him when she thought he wasn't looking, felt his own gaze drawn to her more often than he could justify. But he'd been fighting it, telling himself all the reasons why anything beyond friendship was impossible. They came from different worlds. Her success would inevitably highlight his struggles, the complexities of dating as a single parent, the risk of disrupting Lily's stability if things didn't work out. Yet watching Grace now, her face illuminated by firefly light as she listened to Lily explain the proper way to care for the insects before releasing them, Flynn felt his careful rationalizations beginning to crumble. The following Saturday, Flynn was putting the finishing touches on Grace's bookshelves in his workshop when his phone rang. It was his sister, Kate. "Hey, big brother, how are things?" "Good," Flynn replied, phone tucked between ear and shoulder as he applied a final coat of varnish. "Busy." "How's Chicago?" "Cold and windy as usual. Listen, I've got some news. I'm being transferred to the Denver office. I'll be just 2 hours away from you guys." Flynn's face broke into a grin. "Seriously, Kate, that's fantastic. Lily will be thrilled. When do you move?" "Next month." "I'll need to find an apartment, get settled, all that fun stuff. But I was thinking I could come visit this weekend, maybe start looking at places. Would that work for you?" "Absolutely," Flynn assured her. "You know you're always welcome. Lily's been asking when Aunt Kate is coming back." They chatted for a few more minutes, making plans for her visit before Kate asked, "So what's new with you? Anyone special in your life these days?" Flynn hesitated, unsure how to answer. "There's someone I've been spending time with, but it's complicated." "Complicated how? Is she married?" "A criminal, your boss?" Flynn laughed. "No, nothing like that. She's great actually. Smart, kind, amazing with Lily, but she's also, well, she's very successful. Like runs her own company, drives an Audi, lives in that new luxury development on the north side of town, successful." And Kate prompted. "Last I checked, success wasn't a character flaw." "It's not that," Flynn sighed, setting down his brush. "It's just, what could she possibly see in me long term? I'm a construction foreman who makes furniture in his backyard shed and struggles to save for Lily's college fund." "Flynn Michael O'Connor," Kate said sternly, "I cannot believe what I'm hearing. Since when do you sell yourself short like this? You're intelligent, hardworking, talented, and an amazing father. Any woman would be lucky to have you in her life. You're my sister." "You're legally obligated to say that." "I'm saying it because it's true," Kate insisted. "Does this woman, what's her name, by the way?" "Grace." "Does Grace seem to care about the financial disparity?" Flynn thought about it. "No, she's never made me feel less than. If anything, she goes out of her way to suggest activities that don't cost much. Last week, she brought over ingredients to make homemade pizza with Lily instead of going out." "Sounds like she values the right things," Kate observed. "Look, Flynn, not everyone is like Amanda. Some people prioritize connection and character over lifestyle and status." Flynn winced at the mention of his ex-wife. Amanda had often expressed frustration with their financial limitations, making him feel inadequate for not providing the life she'd envisioned. "Maybe," he conceded. "But it's not just about money, it's about worlds. Hers is board meetings and investment portfolios. Mine is construction sites and PTA meetings." "And yet you're spending time together, enjoying each other's company," Kate pointed out. "Maybe those different worlds complement each other. Maybe she needs a little more realness in her life, and maybe you could use a little more adventure in yours." Flynn was quiet for a moment, considering his sister's words. "When did you get so wise about relationships?" "Last I checked, you were swearing off dating after that disaster with what's-his-name." "Ryan," Kate supplied. "And wisdom often comes from making spectacular mistakes, which, by the way, you can only make if you actually take a chance." After hanging up with his sister, Flynn stood in his workshop, Kate's words echoing in his mind. Was he letting his insecurities prevent him from exploring something potentially meaningful with Grace? As if summoned by his thoughts, his phone buzzed with a text from her. "Just checking if we're still on for delivery tomorrow. I can't wait to see the finished bookshelves." Flynn replied in the affirmative, then hesitated before adding, "Lily's spending the day at a friend's birthday party. Maybe we could grab lunch after the installation." Grace's response came almost immediately. "I'd love that." The next day, Flynn arrived at Grace's house with the completed bookshelves loaded carefully in his truck. Though he'd known her address, seeing her home in person was still a bit of a shock. It wasn't ostentatious by any means, but the modern design, expansive windows, and manicured landscaping spoke of a lifestyle far removed from his own modest rancher. Grace greeted him at the door in jeans and a simple t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. Despite the surroundings, she looked approachable and genuinely happy to see him. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. "The office is this way." Flynn followed her through the house, noting the tasteful but minimal decor. It was beautiful, but didn't feel particularly lived in, more like a high-end hotel than a home. "I've only been in this house 8 months, Grace explained, seeming to read his thoughts. "And I travel so much for work that I haven't really had time to make it feel like home." The office was a spacious room with large windows overlooking a small garden. Flynn spent the next 2 hours carefully installing the bookshelves, acutely aware of Grace watching him work. She asked questions about the process, handed him tools when needed, and seemed genuinely fascinated by the craftsmanship involved. When the installation was complete, Grace stood back, admiring the transformation of the wall. The built-in shelves were made of rich walnut with subtle detailing that complemented the desk Flynn had also crafted for her. "Flynn, they're perfect," she said softly. "Even better than I imagined. I'm glad you like them," he replied, feeling a surge of pride at her reaction. "Like them?" "I love them." She ran her hand along one of the shelves. "This is exactly what this room needed, something warm and handcrafted to balance all the modernity." Flynn began gathering his tools. "I should clean up before we head to lunch." "Actually," Grace said, a hint of nervousness in her voice, "I thought maybe we could have lunch here. I prepared something nothing fancy, just sandwiches and a salad, but if you'd rather go out." "Here sounds great," Flynn assured her, surprised and touched by the gesture. Grace led him to a sunny patio off the kitchen, where she'd set a small table with a simple but appealing lunch spread. As they ate, their conversation flowed easily, touching on everything from Lily's upcoming school play to Grace's latest business venture, a renewable energy startup in Michigan. "So your sister's moving closer?" Grace asked when Flynn mentioned Kate's upcoming visit. "Yeah, she'll be in Denver. It'll be nice having family nearby again. She's been in Chicago for the past 5 years. You're close," Flynn nodded. "Very. She's 2 years younger than me, but sometimes I think she's the wiser one. She's certainly not afraid to tell me when she thinks I'm being an idiot," Grace laughed. "That sounds like a good sibling relationship. I always wished I had a brother or sister." "You're an only child." "Yes. My parents had me later in life. My mom was 40. They tried for more, but it didn't happen." A shadow crossed Grace's face. "They died in a car accident when I was in college. Drunk driver." Flynn reached across the table without thinking, covering her hand with his. "I'm sorry, Grace." She turned her hand over, her fingers intertwining with his. "Thank you. It was a long time ago, but some days it still feels fresh." She took a deep breath. "That's part of why I work so hard, I think. They sacrificed so much to give me opportunities. I feel like I need to make the most of everyone." "I understand that," Flynn said, thinking of his own relentless drive to provide for Lily. "But I'm learning slowly that success isn't just about work and achievement. It's also about connection, about the people we choose to share our lives with." Grace's eyes met his, a question in them that Flynn finally felt ready to answer. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. "Flynn," Grace began, her voice soft, "I've been wanting to tell you." His phone rang, breaking the moment. Flynn reluctantly released her hand to check it, seeing Lily's friend's mom on the caller ID. "I'm sorry, I should take this," he said, answering the call. "Hello, Flynn, it's Melissa. I'm at the emergency room with Lily. She fell off the trampoline at the party and might have broken her arm. She's okay, just scared and asking for you." Flynn's heart raced. "I'll be right there." "Which hospital?" After getting the details, he hung up and looked at Grace, already on his feet. "Lily's hurt. I need to go." "What happened?" Grace asked, standing as well. "Trampoline accident at the birthday party, possible broken arm." Flynn was already gathering his things, mind racing through what needed to happen, getting to the hospital, dealing with insurance, making sure Lily wasn't too frightened. "I'll drive you," Grace said decisively. "You don't have to, Flynn," she cut him off gently. "Your truck is full of tools and you're upset. Let me drive you." He hesitated only briefly before nodding. 10 minutes later, they were in Grace's Audi, heading toward the hospital. Flynn sat tensely in the passenger seat, trying to keep his worry in check. "She'll be okay," Grace assured him. "Kids are resilient." I know, it's just she's never broken anything before. She must be so scared. She has you, Grace said simply. That makes all the difference. When they arrived at the emergency room, Flynn rushed in with Grace close behind. They found Lily in an exam room with Melissa, her arm in a temporary splint as she waited for X-rays. "Daddy," Lily cried when she saw him, tears streaking her face. Flynn was at her side in an instant, carefully gathering her into a hug. "Hey, Lilybug, I'm here now. It really hurts," she sniffled against his shoulder. "I know, sweetheart. The doctors are going to fix you up." He smoothed her hair back from her forehead. "What happened?" "I was jumping with Emma and I tried to do a flip, but I landed wrong and my arm went like this." She demonstrated with her uninjured arm, making Flynn wince. "Grace," Lily exclaimed, noticing her for the first time. "You came too." "Of course I did," Grace said, moving to the bedside. "I was worried about you." Melissa, sensing the family moment, excused herself to return to the birthday party, promising to check in later. Shortly after, a nurse arrived to take Lily for X-rays, and Flynn went with her, leaving Grace in the waiting room. An hour later, the diagnosis was confirmed. A clean break that wouldn't require surgery, just a cast for 6 weeks. As the doctor finished placing the bright pink cast that Lily had proudly selected, Flynn stepped out briefly to update Grace, expecting to find her still in the waiting room. Instead, she was at the nurse's station, deep in conversation with the charge nurse. When she saw Flynn, she quickly wrapped up and came over. "How is she?" Grace asked, genuine concern in her expression. "Broken radius, but it's a clean break. No surgery needed, just a cast for 6 weeks." Flynn ran a hand through his hair, the adrenaline of the past few hours beginning to fade. "She's actually pretty excited about the pink cast and all the signatures she's going to collect," Grace smiled. "That sounds like Lily, always finding the positive." "Yeah, she's something else." Flynn hesitated, then added, "You didn't have to stay, Grace. I know you probably had other plans for your Sunday." "There's nowhere else I'd rather be," she said simply, and the honesty in her voice made Flynn's heart constrict. "What were you discussing with the nurse?" he asked, curious. A flash of something embarrassment crossed Grace's face. "Oh, just checking on how much longer the paperwork might take." Before Flynn could question her further, the doctor emerged with Lily, who was cradling her new cast like a prize. "Look, Grace, it's pink. And the doctor said I can still go to school tomorrow, and everyone can sign it, and I'll be the first one in my class to have a cast." Grace laughed, kneeling to Lily's level. "It's very impressive and so brave of you to handle all this." "The doctor said I was super brave," Lily confirmed. "Even when they had to pull my arm to make the bones line up." Flynn winced at the description but was grateful for his daughter's resilience. "Let's get you home, Lilybug. You've had quite a day." As they walked toward the exit, a hospital administrator approached them with some paperwork. Flynn braced himself for the inevitable discussion of insurance and payment plans. His coverage was decent, but had a high deductible he hadn't budgeted for this month. "Mr. O'Connor, everything has been taken care of," the administrator said. "You're free to go." Flynn frowned in confusion. "What do you mean taken care of? I need to provide my insurance information. It's already been handled," the woman repeated, glancing briefly at Grace. "There's no balance due." Flynn turned to Grace, comprehension dawning. "Did you?" Grace looked slightly uncomfortable. "We can discuss it later. Right now, let's get Lily home." Flynn felt a complicated mix of emotions: gratitude, embarrassment, and a hint of frustration at having such a personal matter handled without his knowledge. But with Lily looking up at him, clearly tired from her ordeal, he simply nodded and guided them toward the exit. The drive back to Flynn's house was quiet, Lily dozing in the back seat, exhausted from the pain, fear, and excitement of the day. When they arrived, Flynn carried his sleeping daughter inside and tucked her into bed, carefully arranging pillows to support her casted arm. When he returned to the living room, Grace was standing awkwardly by the door, clearly unsure of her welcome after the hospital revelation. "I should go," she said softly. "It's been a long day for all of you." "Wait," Flynn said. "About the hospital bill." Grace took a deep breath. "I'm sorry if I overstepped. I wanted to help. And I knew you'd be worried about Lily, not thinking about the financial aspect." "I appreciate the thought, I really do," Flynn said, choosing his words carefully. But that's not how I operate, Grace. I don't accept charity. It wasn't charity, she countered, a hint of frustration in her voice. It was one friend helping another in a moment of need. Would you have hesitated to help me if our situations were reversed? That's different. Why? Because I have more money than you do, Grace challenged. That doesn't make your needs any less valid than mine. Flynn ran a hand through his hair, struggling to articulate the complex feelings swirling within him. Look, I've been taking care of myself and Lily for a long time. I'm not used to accepting help, financial or otherwise. I understand that, Grace said, her voice softening. Independence is important to you. It's one of the things I admire most about you, actually. But Flynn, being independent doesn't mean you have to do everything alone. Her words struck a chord, echoing thoughts he'd had during his darker moments, the times when the weight of single parenthood, financial pressures, and loneliness felt almost too heavy to bear alone. I'll pay you back, he said finally. If that's what you need to do, I understand, Grace replied. But please know that it wasn't about the money for me. It was about caring for you and Lily. The simple honesty in her statement broke through something in Flynn. The careful walls he'd built around his heart since Amanda left, the defensive independence he'd cultivated, the fear of allowing himself to need someone, all of it suddenly seemed unnecessary and exhausting in the face of Grace's genuine care. Why? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Why do you care so much about us? Grace stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. Because somehow in these past few weeks, you and Lily have become the most important people in my life. Because when I'm with you, I feel more like myself than I have in years. Because she took a deep breath. Because I'm falling in love with you, Flynn O'Connor. The admission hung in the air between them, the truth that had been building from that first moment in the grocery store parking lot finally spoken aloud. Grace, Flynn began, his heart racing. I've been fighting this because I thought we were too different, that our worlds couldn't possibly align, that someone like you couldn't possibly want someone like me. Someone like me, Grace echoed, a sad smile playing on her lips. You mean someone who's lonely despite their success. Someone who has a beautiful house that doesn't feel like a home. Someone who was having panic attacks in parking lots because they'd forgotten how to connect with what really matters. She moved closer still, close enough that Flynn could see the flecks of gold in her hazel eyes. Meeting you and Lily showed me what I've been missing. Not material things, I have plenty of those, but connection, family, love freely given without calculation. Flynn felt the last of his resistance crumbling. With Amanda, he'd always felt he was striving and falling short. With Grace, he felt valued for exactly who he was. I'm falling in love with you too, he admitted, the words bringing with them a profound sense of relief. I think I have been since you sat on my kitchen floor coloring with Lily. Grace smiled, reaching up to touch his face gently. That was a good day. Flynn leaned into her touch, then slowly bent to kiss her. It was a gentle kiss, tender and full of promise, worth every moment they'd waited for it. When they broke apart, Grace rested her forehead against his. We'll figure the rest out together, okay? The money, the different worlds, all of it, one day at a time. Flynn nodded, finally allowing himself to believe in this unexpected gift that had come into his life. One day at a time. 1 year later, Flynn stood in the backyard of the house he now shared with Grace and Lily, surveying the gathering of friends and family. Kate was chatting animatedly with Grace's colleagues from the venture capital firm. Mrs. Patel was fussing over the appetizer table. Lily, her arm long-heeled, was showing her friends the elaborate treehouse Flynn had built in the massive oak tree, his wedding present to her. The past year had brought many changes. Flynn had gradually scaled back his construction work to focus on his woodworking business, which had grown substantially thanks to commissions from Grace's business connections, who admired the pieces in her office. They decided to move into Grace's house, but not before Flynn had added his touches: a workshop twice the size of his old one, a vegetable garden that Lily tended with pride, and handcrafted furniture that made the once sterile space feel like home. Penny for your thoughts? Grace asked, slipping her arm around his waist. Flynn smiled down at his new wife, still sometimes amazed by the journey that had brought them here. Just thinking about how different things were a year ago, how I never could have imagined this. Regrets, Grace asked, a teasing lilt to her voice. She knew the answer. Not a single one, Flynn assured her, pressing a kiss to her temple. Though I do wonder sometimes what would have happened if I hadn't stopped to help you that day in the parking lot. I've wondered that too, Grace admitted. But I like to think we would have found each other somehow. Some things are just meant to be. From across the yard, Lily called out, Daddy, Grace. Come see what Emma and I found, duty calls, Flynn laughed, taking Grace's hand as they crossed the lawn toward their daughter. As they walked, Flynn reflected on the lessons of the past year. He'd learned that strength wasn't about handling everything alone, but about having the courage to accept love and support. He discovered that differences in wealth and background meant little when compared to shared values and genuine connection. And most importantly, he'd found that sometimes the most unexpected encounters could lead to the greatest happiness. What had begun as a simple act of kindness in a grocery store parking lot had blossomed into a love that filled all their lives with joy, proving once again that the most valuable things in life couldn't be measured by bank accounts or possessions, but by the fullness of the heart and the family created through love.